I'd spent 3 years surviving on cheap grocery store meals, turning down every night out with friends, and cutting every small pleasure out of my life for one single dream, a solo trip to Iceland. At 31, working as an office administrator at a Portland medical clinic, I almost never spent money on myself. Every extra dollar went straight into a separate savings account, locked away, earmarked for black sand beaches, glacier hikes, hot spring soaks, and the quiet freedom I had craved for years. My older sister Lila blew her income on party nights, fast fashion, and impulsive shopping sprees. My mother Diane poured money into local community charity work, mostly to polish her reputation around the neighborhood. I saved for hope. Hope that for once, I would not be my family's permanent emergency backup, the person expected to drop everything whenever someone else messed up their life. The day I headed to Portland International Airport, the sky hung dull and gray, typical Pacific Northwest drizzle misting over the parking lot. My mother's call hit my phone right as I pulled up to the departure curb. Her tone was firm, no softness at all. The same guilt-heavy voice I had heard my whole life whenever she needed something from me. "Megan, you need to cancel this trip immediately," Diane told me over the line, her voice sharp with frustration. Lila's boyfriend just flaked on childcare out of nowhere. Jax is running a mild fever. Zoe won't settle down, throws non-stop tantrum, and your sister cannot manage both children by herself. Family comes first. You understand? I squeezed my passport so hard my knuckles went pale, my rolling suitcase sitting beside me on the concrete. Family comes first had never been a rule that applied to Lila or Diane. That rule only ever applied to me. I was the dependable daughter, the reasonable, the person expected to drop every personal goal and clean up the messes other adults chose to make. Lila was 34 years old. She chose to have those 2 kids. She was the parent. "No, I am not canceling this trip," I told her, my voice shaking but steady. "I have planned and saved for 3 long years. This is non-negotiable. Lila needs to figure out her own childcare solution." Diane's temper flared right away. She lectured me about being cold and selfish, about turning my back on my own blood. She warned me there would be real consequences if I dared board that plane. I ended the call, switched my phone onto airplane mode, and walked toward. Part of me twisted with familiar guilt. A bigger part of me burned with quiet relief. For once in life, I was putting myself. The transatlantic flight dragged onwards. I slept fitfully, stared out the window at endless stretches of ocean clouds, and kept replaying my mother's angry words in my head. I kept telling myself I had done. Adults should handle their children. My vacation was earned. Every penny. When the plane touched down in Reykjavik, Iceland, crisp local morning sunlight filtered through the cabin. I switched airplane mode off. My phone exploded instantly. 38 missed calls. Most from Diane, several from Lila, a couple from unknown local Portland numbers. Texts poured in after another. Rage, desperate pleas, bitterizations. Then one short, brutal message from Lila stopped cold. "The kids are on your front porch. I can't do this anymore. They're your problem now." Blood ran cold. I leaned against the port wall, luggage bumping my legs, reading that text over and over, half convinced. Jax was 7. He was 5. 2 small, vulnerable children, sitting alone outside my suburban Portland house thousands of miles away. I scrolled back. None of those calls mid-flight. Every single one piled up only as the plane landed. They had known perfectly well I could not answer while in the Atlantic. They waited until I was completely unreachable, then dumped those 2 little kids at my as punishment. Another text popped up from my later. "This is what selfishness gets you. Your choice, Megan. Live with it." Crowds of passengers moved past me, chattering in mixed foreign accents, excited for their own Iceland adventures. Tourists laughed nearby, hauling winter camera bags. I stood frozen in the bright airport terminal, half a world away from my home, staring at the screen. My dream vacation had barely even started, and already, everything I worked so hard for was shattered, images flashing in my mind. 2 small kids sitting on my porch, scared and confused, with no adult to keep them safe. There was no way I could stay and enjoy glaciers and hot springs knowing that was happening back home. I stared at the flighting app on my phone, already bracing for the outrageous cost of a last-minute emergency return ticket. Whatever happened next, I knew I had to get back to Portland as fast as humanly possible. I tapped furiously at my phone inside the Reykjavik airport terminal, my fingers trembling as I hunted for the earliest available return flight back to Portland. Last-minute international tickets were brutally expensive, far more than I had anticipated. Every dollar would get pulled straight from that 3-year Iceland savings pot I had guarded so carefully. It hurt to watch that hard-earned balance shrink before I had even seen a single black sand beach. But there was no other choice. I could not sit overseas while 2 frightened little kids waited alone outside my house. My best friend Claire picked up on the first ring when I called her, my voice cracking as I spilled the whole insane story. She was already grabbing her keys before I finished talking. She promised she would drive over to my suburban house right away, check on Jax and Zoe, and stay with them until I could land back in Oregon. That small lifeline kept me from completely falling apart. I booked the red-eye connecting flight, dumped my unpacked winter travel gear back into my rolling suitcase, and dragged myself toward the departure gate. Every bit of vacation joy drained completely out of me. 13 hours of layovers and cramped airline seats blurred together. My mind kept cycling through worst-case scenarios. What if the kids were scared? What if neighbors had found them and called the police? What fresh lies would my mother and sister be ready to throw in my face the second I stepped foot back on home soil? By the time my plane touched down at Portland International Airport, gray Pacific Northwest rain streaked down the windows, matching the heavy feeling sitting in my chest. Claire sent me steady text updates the whole way. Neighbors had spotted Jax and Zoe sitting on my porch, huddled together with their small backpack. Someone had dialed local police. When officers arrived, Claire was already there, wrapping jackets around the shivering children. The cops had not taken the kids away immediately, but they opened an official report, noting the abandonment. My stomach twisted reading those messages. This was no longer just messy family drama. It was. I grabbed my bags and raced straight to my house. Police cruisers were still parked out front when I pulled into my yellow porch light spilled over the fronts. Jax and Zoe sat on my living room couch wrapped in blankets, quiet. Claire knelt beside them, handing out juice boxes to calm them. The moment I walked the door, my mother Diane and sister Lila pushed past the officers right in some, like they had every right. Diane went straight on the offensive before I could even set my seat. "See what your selfish caused?" she said, loud enough for the nearby officer to hear. "If you had just agreed to watch those children like asks, none of this mess would have..." Lila stood behind her mother, eyes red, putting on a dramatic performance. "I had no other options," sniffled. "I was falling apart. I thought you would step up, your aunt." Anger burned hot under my skin. "You left 2 small children alone on my doorstep thousands of miles away, knowing I was the country." That was desperation. That was punishment. You both knew I could not. Diane shook her head, refusing to accept any blame. She spun the whole story smoothly, painting me as the cold, ungrateful relative who ran off on vacation and abandoned me. She told the officers I had always been the responsible one, that I had always helped for. Lila nodded at every word. I could feel the police officers watching me, evaluating. The narrative they were hearing made me sound cruel. I tried to argue, but every time I opened my mouth, Diane talked over me, raising her voice. Claire stepped in beside me, backing up my timeline, confirming I had booked this Iceland trance. Even so, the damage was already starting. Word would spread fast through our tight suburban community. My mother was very good at... Later that evening, after officers finished the report and left, I grew sleepy. I got them set up on my guest room bed. Once they were settled, Diane pulled aside in my kitchen, her tone dropping from public performance to pressure. "This can away," she told me. "Take guardianship of Jax and Zoe. Leave them here in your house. We can bury this police report. No reputation gets ruined." I stared at her in disbelief. She really believed I would just absorb my sister's full-time parenting burden to sweep their wreck mistake under the rug. That was the ill plan all along. It had never been about a last-minute childcare emergency. It was a calculated trap. I turned her down flat. Diane's face hardened. "Fine," she said. "If you refuse to do your family duty, then it comes next. People around here will learn exactly what we are." When Lila and Diane walked out my front door, I heard the front door lock click behind them. I realized with a jolt they still held a spare key to my house. Risk had not gone anywhere. I leaned against my kitchen, exhausted, listening to the quiet breathing of 2 innocents down the hallway. The temporary peace in my home was only skin deep. The real fight was just getting started. The sun peeked weakly through my kitchen window the next morning. I had barely slept. Every few hours I had tiptoed down the guest room hallway to check on Jax and Zoe. The kids woke up quiet and withdrawn. Zoe clung to my sleeve while Jax sat on the floor, staring blankly at the television. They had not asked for any of this chaos, and that weighed heavier on me than any argument with my family. Claire showed up early with breakfast groceries and strong coffee. She sat across from me at the dining table while the children ate frozen waffles in the next room. "You cannot keep playing this out on emotion alone," she said, lowering her voice so the kids would not overhear. "Diane and Lila are not going to back down. They have already planted their version of the story around town. People are talking. I pulled out my phone. Multiple distant relatives had texted me overnight. Most messages were filled with disappointment, repeating the same lines Diane had spread, that I had run off on a fancy vacation and abandoned my own niece and nephew. One cousin even called me selfish for wasting money on overseas travel instead of helping family. Hardly anyone bothered to ask for my side of what had happened. My hands shook as I booked an appointment with a local family law attorney for later that day. I needed clear answers about what I was legally obligated to do. Deep down, part of me still feared that the system might force me to take guardianship. That fear gnawed at my chest. I loved those two kids, but becoming their full-time caretaker would erase every piece of the life I had built for myself. My career, my home, my future, all of it would vanish. Before I could head out for my lawyer meeting, Diane called. She did not yell right away. Her tone was soft, almost the kind of voice she used when she wanted to manipulate me into giving in. She said Lila was that the whole family was falling, and that everyone would forgive my mistakes if I just stepped up for the children. She hinted that community gossip would die down quickly if I agreed to take the kids in permanently. I kept my voice. I have no legal duty to raise Lila's son. She is there. This conversation's over, Diane snapped immediately. She accused me of hiding behind lawyers to avoid my blood responsibilities. She said she would make sure every person in our circle understood how cold-hearted I truly was, and that I would regret pushing them. The attorney's small office felt calm and grounded in contrast to the storm swirling around my. She walked me through Oregon family law. I had zero automatic legal obligation to assume guardianship over Jack. The burden stayed firmly with Lila as their biological mother. Still, she warned me, public opinion could work against me. Diane had deep roots in the local neighborhood through her charity work. She had built plenty of connections, and she would. The lawyer urged me to save every text message, every call log, every piece of proof. By the time I got back home, word had already. I stopped at the neighborhood grocery store to pick up more snacks for the kids. An old family acquaintance glanced at me across the cereal aisle, gave me a cold, mental look, and walked away without a single greeting. That small interaction stung more than expected. Diane's smear campaign. That night I composed a formal written message, sent both by email and text to Lila. I laid out boundaries. I would not pursue guardianship. I would not keep housing Jackson Zoe long-term. Child Protective Services would guide the official next steps. I told them I expected them to cooperate fully. Minutes after hitting send, she did not do the facts. She simply said that I would live to regret pushing. I sat in my living room, watching Jax and Zoe cuddle. Their small hands moved up sheets of paper, completely unaware of the high-stakes adult fight unfolding all around them. Some of my extended family had already chosen sides against me. My mother and sister were no longer only using guilt trips. They were going to strike harder. I had drawn my hard line, but crossing that line had brought real consequences. I could feel the pressure clean all around me, and I knew this was only the beginning. I kept waiting for things to calm down after I sent that firm written notice to Diane and Lila. Foolishly, I believed hard facts and legal rules would quiet all the noise. I thought once people learned the full story, they would see how unfairly I was being targeted. That hope crumbled fast over the next few days. Child Protective Services came to my house for 2 separate home visits. The social worker was polite and professional, yet I could sense the weight of Diane's version of events hanging over every question. She asked repeatedly if I was certain I would not consider guardianship. Jax and Zoe remained quiet during the interviews, clinging to each other, and every time I said no, I felt a sharp stab of guilt twist inside my chest. I cared about those children, but caring did not mean I had to sacrifice my entire future for their mother's failures. Claire kept checking in, bringing meals and sitting with the kids so I could go to work. My job at the medical clinic grew increasingly awkward. A distant cousin of Lila's worked part-time in the front office. News of the family drama leaked into my workplace. Coworkers exchanged quiet glances when I walked into break room meetings. No one said anything openly to my face, but whispers circled whenever I turned my back. I tried to focus on patient files and administrative tasks, yet the gossip lingered like a bad smell. One afternoon, my cell phone pinged with an email attachment forwarded from the social worker's office. My blood ran cold when I opened it. It was a typed document, formatted to look official. The paper claimed I had voluntarily petitioned to take permanent guardianship of Jax and Zoe. It bore a signature that looked shockingly similar to mine. My heart hammered in my ribs as I stared at the page. I had never signed anything like this. I had never even filled out a single form for guardianship. This was a forgery. I immediately called my lawyer. She told me forged family court documents were far more dangerous than I first realized. If this fake paperwork got filed with the court before I could challenge, I could get trapped into legal responsibility for this, no matter what I actually wanted. The document would create a mountain of work to undo. I needed to collect evidence proving the signature was fake, and I needed to do it. I paced my living room after ending all, running through every possible. How far were Diane and Lila willing to go to force this life onto me? It was one thing to dump children on my porch and spread gossip. Fabricating legal paperwork crossed into entirely new territory. That same evening, Diane called. She did not mention the forged form. She spoke in soft, wounded tones, telling me how hurt Lila was, how the children kept asking for their in. She hinted there was still an easy way to fix everything, if I would just fighting. I understood her subtext. Back off, accept guardianship, and the fake document never sees the inside of. I hung up on her with a. Neutral relatives started reaching out too. Some said I should just compromise, suggested temporary custody for her too, as if 1 or 2 years of my life was a trivial thing. They bought Diane's narrative that I held all the power and was choosing cruelty. Hardly anyone stopped to ask why Lila faced zero pressure to step back into her. That night, I sat on my couch while Jax and Zoe slept. I spread copies of the forged printout across my coffee table under the overhead lamp, comparing the fake signature against old tax forms and bank papers pulled from my filing cabinet. The imitation was good, close enough to fool someone who did not know my. If I had not gotten that email from a social worker, this could have slipped past. Up until now, I thought the fight was only about public opinion. Now I saw the truth. My family was ready to use falsified legal papers to trap me. Facts and honesty would not protect me. Even with a lawyer on my side, I was outnumbered. Most people around me already leaned toward believing Diane's side of the story. Isolation settled heavy shoulders. I had thought clarity would be anything better, but this new revelation made it clear the work ahead. The discovery of the forged guardianship document rewired every part of how I saw my family. Before this, I'd told myself they were toxic, manipulative, and selfish, but still human, still capable of some line they wouldn't cross. That fake signature erased every last shred of my naivety. Diane and Lila weren't just taking advantage of me. They were actively trying to legally trap me into a life I never signed up for. First thing the next morning, I sent my lawyer clear photos of the forgery, paired with legitimate samples of my handwriting from old bank documents and employment forms. My attorney's reply was blunt and urgent. This wasn't a minor mistake. It was felony-level falsification of legal records. If we could prove who created it, we could press official charges. But proof meant digging deeper, and digging deeper meant opening doors my family had worked hard to keep closed. While I was sorting legal files and cross-referencing signature inconsistencies, Claire dropped by with coffee and a heads-up. She'd been talking to a few long-term neighbors who'd known our family for years. One older woman mentioned offhand how my mom's community charity fund had always felt off. Diane ran a small local outreach group that collected cash donations, holiday toy drives, and grocery funds for low-income neighborhood families. She'd been in charge of all the money for nearly a decade. Everyone praised her as generous, selfless, the heart of the community. But lately, neighbors had noticed fewer families receiving help, even as donations kept rolling. Curious and increasingly suspicious, I pulled up the public charity registry for Oregon State that night. I'd never bothered checking it more. I'd always bought my mom's public persona, the kind, charitable matriarch who cared about everyone outside our home while destroying her own daughters from the inside. What I found made my stomach. The fund's annual public reports showed consistent donation growth over the past 3 years. Exactly the same 3 years I'd been saving starving myself to afford my Iceland trip. But the expenditure records did. Thousands of dollars were unaccounted for, line item big, labeled only as general outreach or community support, with no receipts, no recipients, no proof the money ever went to anyone. Pieces started clicking together in terrifying. My mom had spent years building a saintly public image to shield her private manipulation. While she was guilting me for saving money for herself, while she was shaming me for being selfish, she'd been siphoning charity funds to cover Lila's endless financial. Lila's missed payments, her maxed credit cards, her impulsive shop. All of it was being quietly covered by community donations meant to help struggling. All those years I'd sacrificed, all the times I'd skipped meals and fun and freedom to build my own life. My own mother had been stealing from the community to enable my sister's irresponsibility. Before I could process the full weight of what uncovered, my phone rang. For the first time since it started, she didn't bother with soft manipulation or fern. Her voice was cold, sharp, and I heard you're asking questions about the fund. she said flatly. Stop digging, Megan. You have no business messing with something that's Where's the going, Mom? The public records don't add up. Funds are missing. She laughed bitterly, completely unfazed by my discovery. Those funds are family resources as much as community sources. Lo was struggling. Next her problems. That's what family does. You would understand if you weren't so... Her blatant admission left me speechless. To her, stealing charity money corruption. It was just another version of first. A rule that only protected Lila, only exposed her failures, only punished me for trying to The call ended with a quiet warning. You keep investigating, regret it. You think the forgery scare was bad? I can make it worse. In that moment, I realized I was no longer fighting just a custody battle or a smear campaign. I'd stumbled onto a full financial scandal. My own mother was willing to commit fraud, ruin my reputation, and trap me legally to protect her stolen funds and my sister. I was trapped between two crises: a forged legal document that steal my future, and a charity embezzlement secret my mom would destroy me to hide. Up until now, I'd been playing defense. Now I understand truth. My family would never stop coming for me until I was completely powerless, completely dependent, completely their sacrifice forever. The second I hung up on Diane, the weight of everything crashed over me all at once. I wasn't just dealing with petty family manipulation or a custody shakedown anymore. I was staring down two separate, life-ruining threats: a forged legal document that could force lifelong motherhood on me, and a charity embezzlement scandal my mom would burn my life to bury. For 3 years, I'd fought for a tiny piece of happiness, a single trip to Iceland to prove I could live for myself. Now my entire career, my home, my reputation, and my freedom were hanging by a thread. The next 48 hours were the loneliest of my life. The whisper campaign Diane started mutated into full-blown neighborhood gossip. People I'd known for years stopped waving when I walked by. The parents I waved to at the local park crossed the street to avoid making eye contact. My mom's charity work had made her untouchable in this community. To everyone outside our toxic household, she was the generous, selfless matriarch who gave back. I was the cold, selfish daughter who abandoned her own family for a vacation. Worse, the rumors leaked deeper into my workplace. I was called into my clinic manager's office mid-shift on Friday afternoon. My boss sat me down gently, but her tone was serious. She'd received multiple anonymous messages complaining about my family instability and questioning whether I was emotionally fit to handle sensitive patient administration work. She didn't fire me, but she made it clear the clinic was monitoring my behavior. One wrong move, one public incident, and I'd lose my steady income, my health insurance, and the only financial stability I'd spent my adult life building. I walked back to my desk with my hands shaking. Diane wasn't just trying to trap me with legal papers. She was systematically dismantling every pillar of my life. At home, the tension felt suffocating. Jax and Zoe could sense the hostility hanging over me. They stopped asking to play, stopped laughing as much, and stayed quiet most of the day. It broke my heart to watch them walk on eggshells in my own house, all because their own mother and grandmother were playing dangerous games to punish me. I loved those games, but I resented the way they'd become pawns in a war I never Even my closest support system started to feel Claire was still there for me, bringing food, staying late to keep me company, helping me sort legal files. But she was exhausted. She had her own job, her own life, and she'd been dragged into my family's chaos for weeks. I could see the fatigue in her eyes, the quiet worry that this fight would never, that my family would keep escalating. For the first time, I felt guilty for pulling her into my... Alone late, I sat on my dark living room floor, staring at the stack of evidence spread out. The fake guardianship form, the mismatched signatures, the incomplete charity financial records, the endless toxic text messages from my mom and sister. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love. I'd been the good daughter, the reliant aunt, the person who always sacrificed. I'd skipped vacations, loaned money, cut shifts, and cleaned up messes for over a decade, just to kiss. And none of it. They didn't respect me. They saw it as weakness. They didn't appreciate my sacrifices. They exploited them. My willingness to be patient, forgiving, and understanding had only given them permission to keep taking more from me until there was almost... I finally let myself grieve it all in that hour. I grieved the Iceland I'd lost. I grieved the normal, loving family I'd always wanted. I grieved the naive, hopeful version of myself that still believed loyalty. That family would eventually love me back if I... That girl... When the sun started to rise, I wiped my eyes. The fear didn't disappear, and the pressure left. But something inside me shifted. I was no longer fighting to fix my family. I was no longer fighting to win their approval or proven. I was fighting to protect my life, my future. Diane and Lila broken me. They thought the social shame, workplace pressure, and legal threats would my resolve. Thought I'd cave, at guardianship, bear the charity fraud, and go back to being their quiet, obedient sacrifice. But calculated. Every attack had stripped away them. Every smear had burned away my guilt. Every illegal move they'd made had given me more proof, more leverage, more reason. Rock bottom. But rock bottom wasn't a defeat. It was them stopped falling. From this day forward, I wasn't playing defense anymore. After that sleepless night, I stopped reacting to my family's chaos and started controlling it. I began the fight methodically, no longer driven by emotion or fear. First thing in the morning, I texted my lawyer every piece of new evidence I had compiled. The mismatched signature samples, the public charity fund discrepancies, Diane's threatening phone call logs, and every toxic text where they admitted manipulating me or abandoning the kids. My attorney confirmed what I already suspected. We had enough material to open a formal investigation into document forgery and potentially financial misconduct, but I knew better than to rush. Winning wasn't about blowing up the scandal overnight. Winning was about building an airtight case they couldn't escape from. Claire showed up early to help me sort physical paperwork while I worked my clinic shift remotely. We split the evidence into two clear piles, proof of legal forgery and proof of missing charity funds. While organizing receipts and public records, we found another critical detail I had missed. Over the past 3 years, exactly during my Iceland savings journey, Diane had withdrawn cash donations monthly, with 0 documented recipients. Every single withdrawal aligned perfectly with months Lila was late on rent, behind on credit card bills, or facing eviction threats. The pattern was undeniable. My mother had systematically diverted community charity money to cover my sister's endless irresponsibility, all while guilting me into living frugal. Sacrifice-filled years for daring to save for one personal dream. That afternoon, I took the next critical step. I went to a local private forensic document specialist and submitted the fake guardianship form alongside my authentic handwriting samples. The specialist reviewed everything and provided a preliminary official opinion. The signature on the court document was digitally traced and forged. It was not my handwriting, not even a close mimic. It was a deliberate, fraudulent alteration. This was the hard proof I needed to neutralize their legal trial. Before I could even process the report, Diane struck again. She posted a long, heartfelt public Facebook post targeting our entire neighborhood network. She painted herself as a grieving, exhausted mother, stuck between 2 daughters, one struggling with broken children, and one cold and selfishly unbothered. She implied I was abandoning vulnerable kids for greed, that I lacked basic family compassion, and subtly hinted I was secretly bitter and ungrateful for everything my family had done. Within dozens of neighbors and distant relatives liked and commented with support. People praised her kindness, sympathized with Lila's, and threw quiet judgment. For the first time, I didn't break down or feel ashamed. I saw it for what it was. Desperate. Diane was scrambling to lock in public support before her 2 scandals She needed the community on her side, so when the forgery and embezzlement out, people would refuse to. She was building her defense in advance, using my reputation as collateral. Instead of firing back with emotional replies, I saved the entire post, screenshot every supportive comment, and added it to my evidence folder as proof of premeditated character assassination. Lila texted me privately, no longer pretending to be hurt or. Her message was short, bitter, and, "You think digging up old messes save you? Drop this, or you'll lose every love." I finally replied without guilt, without hesitation. "I'm not anything. You and Mom chose to forge legal documents and steal community money to trap me. Every choice has consequences. I'm done." It was the first time I had ever spoken to them with complete, unshakable firmness. No more begging for standing, no more hope change, no more yielding to their end. Hours later, 2 neutral extended family members reached me. They'd seen my mother's post, but had also heard whispers of strange charity fund activity. They admitted they'd stayed quiet to inflict, but they were willing to testify that Diane had always controlled all charity alone, with zero currency. Slowly but surely, the drifting. For weeks, my family had all the power, public opinion, community trust, legal threats, and social pressure. Now I held the unbreakable evidence, the rumors and lies. I had receipts, forensic proof, witness statements. The fear that had paralyzed me for months melted entirely. I was no longer the cornered, desperate daughter trying to survive their attacks. I was the one game. Diane and Lila feel it too. Their messages grew shorter, angrier, and more frantic by the hour. They were losing control of the narrative, losing control of the set for me. And for the first time since I boarded Iceland plane, the one's panicking. The balance of power first. And the final showdown was unavoidable. The morning after I secured forensic proof of the forgery, the entire dynamic of my family's war against me flipped from unstable to desperate. Diane and Lila were no longer strategically attacking me. They were scrambling to cover their tracks. I could feel their panic in every delayed text, every missed call, every sudden silence when I mentioned the charity fund. Knowing the truth was my shield now. I moved methodically to lock down every loose end. First, I changed every lock on my house. I revoked all spare keys my mother and sister had held for years. After everything they'd done, the thought of them having unrestricted access to my home used to terrify me. Now it just felt reckless, and I was done being reckless with my own safety. Next, I compiled a full chronological evidence packet for my lawyer. I organized the forensic handwriting report, 3 years of charity fund public record, witness statements from family members willing to speak up, Diane's threatening call log, and every text proving Lila's premeditated child abandonment. For the first time, my case wasn't based on words or feelings. It was built on dates, receipts, and official documentation. While I finalized my legal strategy, Diane played her most desperate card to destroy me before I could go public. She filed an official counterclaim with the Community Charity Board, accusing me of unauthorized fund tampering. She fabricated a story that I'd secretly withdrawn small donation amounts years prior to cover personal bills, framing me as the greedy, dishonest family member who'd always resented her charitable work. She claimed I was now digging up old charity records not to expose her corruption, but to distract from my own alleged financial mistake. It was a blatant, last-ditch deflection. She knew the forgery case was collapsing. She knew witness statements were stacking against her, so she tried to flip the script entirely and paint me as the accusation hit. My clinic manager was forwarded the charity board complaint within hours. I was pulled into a second serious meeting in as many weeks. The atmosphere was colder this time. My boss made it clear that even unproven financial allegations were dangerous for a medical administration role that required strict trust and integrity. She didn't suspend me, but she put my employment status on a formal probationary period. One misstep, one official filing against me, and I would lose my job. Diane knew exactly what she targeted: my career, my stability, my reputation, the very foundation of the independent life I'd built myself, to pressure me into battle. Lila piled on the She contacted Child Protective Services with a revement, claiming I'd been uncooperative and emotionally unstable throughout the entire childcare process, insinuating I was unfit to be around the kids at all. She tried to strip me of any goodwill I'd earned for housing Jax and Zoe in those chaotic first days, but their desperate backfire only pushed neutral party off the fence. The 2 extended family witnesses, who'd reached out before, agreed to formal, written statements confirming Diane's complete, unregulated control over all charity funds. A longtime volunteer from the community charity also messaged me privately. She'd suspected mismanagement for years, had witnessed Diane making unrecorded withdrawals, and was willing to testify under. All at once, the sides won. It was no longer my word against my mother and sister's lies. It was multiple independent witnesses plus hard evidence against their Claire sat with that night, going over every detail of the upcoming. She watched me highlight the final pieces of my case and They have nothing left but lies now, she said. Every move they make them deeper. She was right. Their smear campaigns, false accusations, and legal manipulation no longer working. The public opinion they'd spent months building was starting to crack. Neighbors who'd previously avoided me began sending quiet, private messages asking story. People were starting to question why a selfless community matriarch needed to forge legal documents and frame for theft. Still, the calling was heavy. My job hung in the balance. My family name was dragged through the mud. I'd lost the peaceful, ordinary life I'd cherished for so long. Even if I won, nothing would ever go back to normal. The family I'd grieved for was truly dead, and no amount of wrecking it back. As I my laptop that night, I understood the final truth of this fight. There'd be no easy victory, no painless fix, no happy reconciliation. The only outcome was accountability. Diane and Lila had played it they had. Their final card was on the table, exhausted and exposed. Now all that remained was the final unavoidable showdown. The truth was ready to be laid bare for every official, every witness, and every person in our community to see. The morning of the official joint review meeting felt eerily silent, like the calm right before a storm crashes ashore. The room was sterile, gray, and completely impartial. A child services conference room paired with a charity board oversight representative, my family court-appointed social worker, and my attorney sitting beside me. Across the table sat Diane and Lila, dressed neat, poised, and ready to perform their well-rehearsed innocent act. They walked in like wronged, grieving family members, heads held high, faces soft with manufactured sorrow. For a second, I almost fell for it again. Almost, but I wasn't that girl anymore. The official proceedings opened with Lila's statement first. She cried quietly, voice trembling, painting herself as an exhausted, overwhelmed single mother struggling to keep her children stable. She repeated her core narrative, that I'd abandoned family for a selfish vacation, that I'd refused to step up when she had nowhere else to turn, and that my unstable attitude had endangered Jack's and Zoe's emotional well-being. She even hinted that my resistance to guardianship proved I was cold and unreliable. Then Diane took her turn. She spoke smoothly, calmly, with the practiced charisma that had fooled our entire community for years. She brought up her decades of charity work, her reputation for helping others, and she wove in her false accusation that I'd attempted to tamper with community funds out of petty jealousy. She claimed I was retaliating against her simply because she'd held me accountable for my selfish choices. They delivered their lies beautifully. For a moment, I saw the room's neutral faces shift. Their performance was convincing. Then my lawyer spoke. She didn't argue with emotion. She laid out evidence, one calculated piece at a time. First, she submitted the forensic document report. She displayed the fake guardianship form side by side with my verified handwriting samples, walking the officials through the digital tracing inconsistencies, the unnatural stroke patterns, and the expert concluded the signature was 100% forged and fabricated without my knowledge or consent. The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. The social worker's pen paused. Diane's fake smile faltered for the first time. Next, my attorney presented the full text and call log time. She highlighted the critical every deliberate delay, proving they'd waited until I was mid-flight and unreachable to abandon the children on my... It wasn't a desperate emergency. It was premeditated. Before they could cover, my lawyer dropped crushing evidence package, the 3-year charity fund financials. She walked the board representative through the unaccounted monthly cash withs, matching every missing donation sum directly to Lila's rent, credit card defaults, and personal financial crises. She submitted witness statements from charity volunteers and neutral family members, confirming Diane's sole, unregulated control over us. With zero oversight and zero the room went dead. Diane's composure shattered. She tried to interrupt, to argue, to claim the records were taken out of... But the official board representative cut her off. The evidence was too clear, too consistent, too fully corroborated, cornered and exposed, necked. She abandoned her innocent act merely, snapping that none of it would have happened if I'd just done my duty and taken. She admitted they'd hoped I'd cave and assume full custody, openly confessing the entire abandonment scheme was meant to form. That admission ceased. By the meeting, the ruling, the forged guardian petition, was officially invalidated and flagged as fraudulent. Child Services formally ruled the child abandonment was premeditated negligence part. Lila was placed on supervised parental probation, required to attend mandatory parent classes, and ordered to maintain stable child care with verified licensed providers moving forward. She would no longer be allowed to dump her children on family members to avoid. As for Diane, the charity board launched an immediate full formal audit of all past funds. Her unilateral control over community donations was revoked definitely, and she was temporarily suspended from all charity leadership roles pending the final investigation. Their monthly lies, legal forgery, and financial corruption were fully exposed. They'd lost battle. Artist. Most bittersweet truth settled over me and closed. I didn't. I felt empty. I'd won my freedom. I'd cleared my name. I'd stopped them from trapping me in a life that was never mine to carry. But I'd also lost every last illusion of a loving, functional family. The mother and sister I'd spent my whole life trying to love and please. They were just two people. My sacrifice and my... Diane and Lila left the room with a single glance at me. No apology, no remorse, no acknowledgement of pain they'd caused. They just walked out, defeated and bitter, already closing ranks to blame. The effort was over. The truth was public. The men broken. But as I stood to leave the conference room, I knew the real healing, the process of rebuilding my lifeless damage, was beginning. The drive home from that final official meeting was the quietest ride I'd ever taken. Gray Portland rain streaked across my windshield, the same rain that had greeted me when I flew back from Iceland weeks earlier. Back then, I'd been terrified, overwhelmed, and running from a family crisis I didn't know how to survive. Today, I was finally running towards something real, my own life. In the days immediately following the ruling, the neighborhood gossip machine completely reversed course. Once the charity board suspension and child neglect findings became public, neighbors began piecing together the truth. The sweet, selfless community image Diane had built for decades crumbled overnight. People realized I hadn't been the selfish one. I'd been the scapegoat. The quiet, avoidant stares turned into apologetic smiles, private messages of support, and neighbors stopping me at the grocery store to say they were sorry for believing the lies. My workplace lifted my probation status officially. My manager pulled me aside and apologized for the stressful investigation period, acknowledging I'd been targeted unfairly by deliberate family sabotage. My job security was fully restored, and every trace of the false financial allegation was erased from my employee record. Still, healing didn't feel like celebration. It felt like letting go. Lila completed her mandatory parenting classes and was ordered by the state to maintain formal, licensed childcare for Jax and Zoe full-time. Child Protective Services kept an open, low-level supervision case on her for 6 months, ensuring she never again attempted to abandon her children or shift parental responsibility onto anyone else. The kids were no longer pawns. They were finally safe inside a structured, accountable routine, even if their home life would never be warm or perfect. Diane faced a full charity audit. The state investigation confirmed years of unauthorized fund diversions to cover Lila's personal debts. She was permanently removed from all community charity leadership roles, barred from handling any donor funds, and forced to pay restitution for the misused money. Her reputation in our suburb collapsed completely. The generous matriarch persona she'd hid behind for years was gone for good. Our family dynamic never recovered, and I didn't want it. I stopped answering Diane's call. I stopped reading her long, defensive text messages where she tried to rewrite history, blame my stubbornness for her downfall, and guilt me into sympathy. I set firm, permanent boundaries. I would be an aunt to Jax and Zoe occasionally, on my own terms, in supervised, safe environments. But I would never again be my family's safe net, their sacrifice, or their support. I no longer felt guilty for choosing. A month after the final, I rebooked my Iceland. This time, there was no last-minute call begging me to sacrifice no threats, no manipulation, no one waiting to destroy my freedom the second I stepped on a plane. I again, slowly and steadily, just but time, every dollar. It wasn't saved through self-denial or quiet suffering. It was saved through self. On the morning of, I stood in my empty, quiet house, no longer afraid of I locked my doors with my locks, keys secure in my pocket, and drove to. The sky was gray, but my chest felt light for the first time. When my plane touched down, I stepped off the aircraft into crisp, clean air, staring out at volcanic hills and distant glaciers. I walked the black sand beaches, soaked in the blue springs, and stood under endless open sky without a single text message waiting to root. I thought about the 3 years I'd been leaving, the trip that broke my family's manipulation, and the nightmare that followed. I lost my childhood illusion of a perfect family. I lost naive trust in the people who raised me. I lost years of quiet, easy peace, but I gained something more valuable. Boundaries. I gained clarity. I gained the courage to stop bleeding myself dry for people who would never appreciate it. I learned that family does not get unconditional access to your future, your savings, your freedom, or your sanity, simply because blood. Love isn't supposed to cost your entire life. Loyalty isn't supposed to require action. I returned home to Portland person, calmer, sharper, unshakably sure of my own worth. My house again. No spare key in the wrong hands, no obligations, no endless family chaos or Diane and Lila. We cross paths occasionally at the grocery store or community parking lot. They never speak to me. They never apologize. They still carry the bitterness of their consequences, choosing to blame me rather than anymore. I don't hate them. I just find from them. My old life ended on that ice ago. The girl who prioritized family approval over her happiness is gone. In her place is the truth. The best way to help toxic people is to stop letting them use. I earned a trip once. Now I get to earn every peaceful, free habit that comes after it. No more sacrifice. No more guilt. No more being the family backup plan. Just me, my life, and the quiet freedom I spent so long fighting to keep.